Hello, Taylor. You're up last. Oh, you're playing out of Commerce 5-5, right? Is that right?
I'm playing out of Commerce 5-5. I'm one of those guys who saw your YouTube video about moving up to the $5 blind, 18 months ago, and I went ahead and did it, and we're still here, not up to 510 yet.
Now, I have to always sort of give my little spiel about LA drop games. And, yes, definitely need to move up to the $5 blind level in yellow chip Southern California games. But my God, does the drop eat you alive in this game? I don't know if it's like 7+1. And again, for people that don't know what I'm talking about with a drop, in California, if you're in a non-Indian casino, and then people have actually told me the Indian casinos do this too, they basically take the full amount that they're going to take on the flop, regardless of the size of the pot. A rake is a percentage. So where I play at Boston Harbor, or Encore Boston Harbor, it's a pretty big rake. It's even at the 2-5 game, the 2-5 game is a 10% rake up to a $10 max. And then it's at the 5-10, we play like 13.5, which is a pretty high collection. I would rather play with a 2-5 rake 10% up to $10 than I would with an $7 or an $8 flat drop. And that's because in small pots, you get eaten alive. So if one person limps at 5-5, and here in California, where the small blind and the big blind are the same, and they just both check, they're going to take more than 50% of the pot. They're going to take 7 or 8. I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's 6 on the flop plus 1 for the bad beat, and then 1 on the turn and 1 on the river. I think it might be 5 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 or something like that. I don't know if you pay attention to that, but they just keep adding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I think it is $8 by the river. So
Yeah, and that's why you'll see. And do you ever see people limp in? Like, it's so crazy, right? Like, you'll still see that, like, limp in from mid to late position. And then when it gets to the small blind, do people say, do you want to chop? Do they allow that?
yes, and there's so much chopping. I have no idea how to play out of the small blind because if it's raised and I have a decent hand, I'll call. But I have no idea if it's limp to me. It's always chopped. So if I ever get in a game there, we actually have to play out of the small blind, I'll have no idea what to do because there is so much chopping.
Right. So sometimes they tried to put a stop to that where somebody limps and then people are like, let's just chop. But then they kind of allow it. The other thing too that sucks is that if there's no flop, or if you raise and take it down, so let's say the caller's in mid position, he raises the 20 and then the blind's filled out, they'll take $2. They take 1 for a modified drop, and then they take 1 for the bad beat jackpot, which I still think could get challenged, but no one's ever challenged it because you never have the opportunity to win the jackpot when there's no hand. So they're still taking $2. This is why over limping in these games, flat calling, especially in this structure, because it's a 500 cap, meaning like you can only buy in for 500. If you're dealing with like sort of large kind of like open sizes, it is a solid sort of approach to play in a structure like this of a lot of 3-better folding and trying to play juiced up pots and sort of avoiding kind of small pots because of the sort of effect of the flat drop. The other thing too is that I think Hollywood Park at this structure is a better game than the 5-5 at Commerce, but you definitely see a lot of recreational players. There's my spiel. Anyways, all right. So how deep are you in this hand?
Okay, we're 775. I'm the effective one. Villain's pretty much similar stack as me.
Okay.
He just sat down maybe 15 minutes prior and like won both his blinds, and that's what chipped up his stack. But we have a 1 big blind and 2 small blinds, so I'm on the button with the second small blind.
Okay. So this is another California great thing. I actually made a tweet about this a long time ago. So in California, there's never a frozen blind. So if somebody gets up there, there's never a frozen button. So if somebody gets up on their button, so this guy's got the small blind on the button, and that's most likely because the guy that was going to be on the button is walking. And you'll see a lot of walking players too, going out and smoking. It's not a time game. So because they don't freeze the button moves to the hero in the small blind, and he's small blind on the button. So it's small, big. Because of that, there's also another scenario here too, where if both players take the big and the small blind, if they both take hand A, they both take the small and the big blind, and then they both get up, The button then moves over to the next player who hasn't taken the blinds, and he's the big blind on the button. And then like the small, I think it's, yeah, he's the big blind on the button. There can be but he can't have, there can be a scenario where there can be blinds behind the button. And I think that's...
There can, but
yeah.
you'll have to do it because the dealers aren't going to be able to figure that out. You'll have to guide them on it. That's
yeah,
for
sure. It's wild. All right. So anyway, small, big. Okay. Small,
yeah.
big.
So we have a limp.
MP limps.
Low jack to 20.
Okay. Uh-huh. And then
I'm on the button. Ace-Queen of Spades.
Okay.
And I go to 85.
3 bets to 85. Sounds good to me.
Low jack calls.
And the low jack calls. So the limper folds, right?
Limper folds. We're heads up. I have a flop of about 175.
Okay.
And flop comes Queen of Hearts, Jack of Diamonds, 4 of Hearts.
Queen of Hearts, Jack of Diamonds, 4 of Hearts here with Ace, Queen of Spades. Okay.
Checks to me. And here's where I probably start getting a little lost in the hand. I bet 70. Before he called, he kind of did this little thing where he talked to himself and says, "Oh, he raised me," or something, just kind of under his breath. And it's kind of weird, but I've always taken that as a sign of strength. So I'm already thinking he's got a decent hand here.
So on this particular flop here, in a single raise pot, I would probably go larger. Like if he limp called on a 2 Broadway, 2 flush board, if he limp called in a 3-bet pot on Queen Jack 4, you have Ace Queen. So you block having top pair. You're also kind of quite shallow here too. I would definitely bet. I might bet like just a little bit smaller. I mean, you're kind of going like, yeah, just a little bit small. I want to keep them in.
Yeah, that was my thinking with this bet is that, if he has ace king or if he has something like tens, I want to get at least one street out of him if I can. So I was thinking smaller, but yeah.
Well, sometimes like in live poker, this can be interpreted kind of as a small bet anyways. So that's why I always talk about it. So, but I would definitely bet for sure. I mean, if that's what you're thinking. So you bet 70. Okay.
Bet 70. And then villain check raises me to 270.
So low jack check raises to 270. Wow. This is interesting because I've got competing thoughts here in my mind. So first of all, just right off the bat, it's not like you bet like insanely small. Like you didn't bet 40 or 50, like you bet 70. Now that could still be interpreted as a small bet in this particular game. I have actually just bet folded the flop here before in these particular situations where someone is just never raising here with less than 1 pair, especially when they check raise against somebody in a 3-bet pot, okay? I actually think, though, that I might find that raise even more so if I didn't have top pair, meaning like it's more likely that your opponent has a value hand on Queen Jack 4 if you were to have kings or aces than it is if you were to have ace queen. Do you follow what I'm talking about?
Because they could have ace queen or...
No.
Like if I had kings, you're saying that it unblocks them from having a value hand?
Well, you don't want to fold if you have kings or aces and they have ace queen.
Right.
If they have 2 pair or better and you've got kings or aces, it's more likely that they have 2 pair or better when you have kings or aces than when you have ace queen because you have a queen in your hand, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's less queens up that's possible. Now, on the flip side to that, if he's got a draw, you're more equity with aces or kings. And I think a lot of my insanely exploitable bet folds were in a lot of single raise pots where I'm just betting with high volume, maybe even sometimes on boards that don't necessarily favor me as a small stakes exploit, taking like a robust bet fold strategy. And they're in with like just a chunk of hands. It's a little bit different in a 3-bet pot here because, I mean, he opened, you 3-bet, he called. So, and it's not, like I said, it's not like you took an insanely small sizing here. And obviously, like the value portion of his range are like what, queen, jack, pocket jacks, and pocket fours. If he's always like 4-betting, say queen, queen, and you block it, there is a flush draw out there, and it's possible that I suppose he could have some sort of big combo draw, but these are always tricky spots in cap games, right? Because if you make the call here, the pot's going to be 540 plus 175. It's going to be like 715, and you guys have only like 400. So you could even be in a spot here, Taylor, where this might just be a shove back or fold. And the reason why is because it's almost like a half pot size bet left. So if you just jam, you're going to get called by the draws. You're going to get called by the draws. I guess the case for not shoving back is if somehow some draws might fold out. I mean, I suppose you could just play this as a call across heart turns if you wanted to continue. Whether you jam now if you want to continue or wait for a card, there's only one more street left, but it's definitely very awkward. If you make the call, the pot's going to be 715, and you guys are only going to have, well, I guess you guys are going to, you guys are only going to have 400 left. If you follow what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I did not think about jamming all in. I did think about folding. I just thought that was too nitty here, given that there were some draws, but maybe that was the play here. I don't know.
So some people are saying that some of these draws have a ton of equity against us, and that's absolutely true. Michael G, moderator extraordinaire, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with him. He says that Ace Jack of Hearts might do this. The reason why I'm not 100% on board with that is I think that one gets called a lot because he's like ahead of Ace King, doesn't need to raise. Another, obviously, some big draws would be like King 10 of Hearts, maybe like Ace 10 of Hearts, things like that. Now, if you're in a situation where you're up against a massive draw that has a bunch of equity against you, or some sort of like value type of hand that beats you, the way to improve your equity in this hand is to burn a card, is to call and then just go call across non-heart turns, as opposed to just rip it in now, because you get to see 50% of what's left, right, to turn and river. So you could play this as a call, wait and see, and then get it in now.
That was kind of my thinking. I ended up calling pretty quickly because I didn't want to. It was kind of like maybe a little Fourth Street chicken, if you will. I just wanted him to, I knew it was going to be probably all in or check for him next. And so, I wanted to see a card come, see if it was a scared card, see what he'd do. And
the other thing,
I wasn't sure where I was at.
The only other thing, I'll try to explain this a little bit more, is the only other time you get into situations where you might want to rip it all in because you might lose value from a draw that would get it in with you now that will fold later on. But I don't think that's going to be the case here in this spot because you're just moving to the turn. That usually comes into play on the turn when you get check raised, or you put yourself in a situation where you're leaving so little behind. Like, say something like this happened where it was on the turn and you called, and then the pot's going to be 700 and the effective stacks are 400 left. At that point, if the river comes a brick and a guy gives up on his bluff, then you've put yourself in a really bad situation where you've given him like a reverse free card, because he would have gotten it all in with you on the turn if you had jammed, but now you wait to the river and then he just gives up on his bluff. This is different because it's flop to turn. And if he's got a big draw anyways, and it bricks turn, he's going to get in with you anyways. So I don't think you lose out on that. So the pot's 715. Let's move to the turn.
Okay, yeah. So I do call, and then the turn is a 7 of diamonds. And
well, wait a minute. Okay, so the turn's the 7 of diamonds. So does that change anything?
Not in my mind.
It doesn't complete any of the straights, right? Like, the combo draws are King 10, 9, 10, and then even some other interior flush draw types of straight draws, King 9, 10, 8, things like that. Really, you wanted to avoid an ace. You wanted to avoid a heart, right? You wanted to avoid an ace, a king, a 10, a 9, or an 8 for really clean cards. So this is a clean card, with just the one little caveat, which I would be shocked if it ever comes into play at Commerce 5-5, that if he was starting some sort of straight draw with a backdoor flush draw, you could make a case that you'd rather see a black 7. But this is it's bricky. Now, does he jam all in? He
jams all in, so I think it's I have $420 left.
And I don't think, here's the thing. So low jack goes all in for 420. If you played the hand this way, yeah, now you have to call because this is not one of these situations where people say, well, if you called the turn, you have to call the river, blah, blah, blah. Like, why did you call the turn if you're not going to call the river when nothing changes? And I always say, well, it's the bet in itself that changes. And again, I'll go back to what I just said 2 minutes ago. That's different. That's moving from turn to river. This is moving from flop to turn. And I just think that he's just if he's going to call off with his monster draws anyways on the turn, he's just going to bet them. So you can't fold now.
Well, that's what I ended up doing after,
You
2-3 minutes in the tank. Yes. I did. I could not figure out, if I just did not see him doing this. Okay, here's what I thought. Even if he's doing a hand like ace jack of hearts or something, there's still what? He's 2-1 on that. So I'm still losing 1 out of 3. The other times he's doing this with, I can definitely see him doing it with jacks, kings.
So, but why did you call the flop though? You wanted to call the flop, and then the only way that
I wanted to see what he was going to do. Yeah, I wanted to see if what cards would come and how he would react to it. But I was lost in the hand. I'll readily admit. I wasn't sure how to think about this hand here. It got me in the I was in the blender.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, it sounds to me, well, that's why you said 4th Street Chicken, right? So you wanted what you wanted to see here was you wanted to see what your opponent was going to do, and what you wanted to. The only way that you were going to continue was if he checked a brick turn and then you were going to jam.
I think so. I was going to evaluate, and if his I guess it doesn't make sense to me in the end here, but yes, basically if he bet small, I would probably call or go all in, or if he checked, I would kind of evaluate based on what the card was. If he had checked me on this, I probably would have gone all in.
Well, again, I mean, I covered it sort of accidentally before, where the reason why it's called 5th Street Chicken, which is another like great small stakes exploit, is because your line of thinking is definitely valid when you are facing an aggressive action, especially in position on the turn, and you call, and then the river is a brick and the guy moves all in, you absolutely can call fold when nothing changes, because the bet in itself is change. I always talk about like no limit deuce to 7, which is the true Cadillac of poker, where you don't really have any community cards. It's all bet sizing patterns. But this is different because here, all of the big combo draws are going to jam. See, when we play 5th Street Chicken, we say we're going to make it look like we're going to call in the river or across a brick. And then when the guy bets out anyways, it cuts down on all his bluffs. The problem here is that he's still moving all in with all his bluffs, because all of his you only have 400 left into a $700 pot. So that's the difference here. Did you ever get a reveal?
Well, I didn't get a reveal. He told me what he thought he had. I just want to say that, one of the reasons I folded is I felt that I looked so strong, and it would be crazy for him to think he would have much fold equity against me with hands like, I don't know, ace 10 of hearts or something like that, whatever
that part is definitely true. But if you put yourself, I agree with you, right? Like you probably do have top pair plus, right? When you call his check raise, right? But what do you think he would have done though with like king 10 of hearts, 9, 10 of hearts, ace 10 of hearts, like on the turn? He's going to call it off anyways, right? So do you think he's going to check those hands to you on the turn?
No, I don't. Not after the fact. I don't. And I do think, after I laid it down, there was a strong chance he does have a draw there. He told me he had queen. Whether I don't know how much I believe that, but
was this before that you told him what you folded?
I never told him what I folded. Okay. So I never revealed it.
The other fun, I mean, this is what it's always fun, like in your spot, like, so you didn't tell him what you folded. So he told you he had queen. I find it very unlikely because of the fact that you had a queen in your hand, right? I would say that there's way more of a chance that he's lying about. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't have a value hand. Some people just lie to lie. They could have queen, jack, or pocket fours. But if you didn't tell him you had ace queen and he's picking a hand, it's unlikely that he's telling the truth because you had ace queen.
So agree.
I
And
mean,
he could have had ace queen as well. So I think my intuition afterwards was that he was probably on a draw, and I probably should have called. But I lost track of how to think about the hand, so I wasn't sure about my flop sizing and
yeah, I mean the other thing that I would just say that the other things to take away from this hand is your bet sizing. Kind of seems to me like you think your sizing on the flop was kind of small. I think it's kind of in between. I don't think it's all that small. I think it's large enough where there isn't going to be like a spazzy random check raise frequency, like if you had bet like 30 or 40. Because if you start this hand betting like 30 or 40, now all of a sudden like you've induced this play. And I think it's probably even worse to not call down, but you did bet. You could even almost treat this like as $100 bet. But at the same time, I don't think here I want to call flop on such a draw heavy board and then fold to a brick on the turn. Whereas, like I said, if you were on the turn and you got check raised on a draw heavy turn and you called and the river was a brick and a guy shipped his stack in at the end, you can absolutely make a case for folding because the bet in itself has changed. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.